Hello there, good morning, good afternoon, maybe even good evening, wherever you are. My name is Kevin May, I'm the editor and co-founder of Tnooz.com. Welcome to another one of our webinars. We're delighted to say this is actually one of the most popular ones that we've ever produced, judging by the numbers that we've registered, so welcome all of you. We're delighted to say that this one we've produced in conjunction with Sabre again for another one of our webinars. And it goes under this title, Create Applications That Inspire the Way the World Travels. Now, what does all that mean? Now, applications isn't just mobile apps. Let's get our heads around that first. Data and search services really are shaping the future of the industry. I think as most of us really do quite understand now, travellers want personalised, relevant offers wherever they are. They want help with their shopping and their searching. And technology brands are starting to develop platforms that allow for this kind of marriage of data and everything else to kind of come together. Applications is all of that. It's not just apps. So what we're going to do over the next 55, 60 minutes or so is we hope have a very engaging discussion, but really kind of inform you as to where we are, where we've been, and where this is all going. So as always, I'm joined here this afternoon. I'm here in the UK. I'm joined here by our co-founder at Tnooz and our CEO and our glamorous producer today, Gene Quinn. He's behind the scenes pressing the buttons, twiddling the knobs. And also I'm joined by a very, very good panel today. So let's see our slide with the panel. And they are Sean Arena, who is the Director Online and Emerging Business at Sabre, and one of his colleagues, Errol Arkan, he's the Director of Product Marketing. They're both in Southlake in Texas today. And also very pleased to say that we have Patrick Surrey, who's the Chief Data Scientist at Hopper. He's in Hopper's offices in Boston, in Massachusetts. As always, very quick disclosure from us. Hopper's CEO is also the Chairman of Tnooz. Hopper here is a guest of Sabre for the webinar today, so just want to let everybody know. So thank you very much. As I said, you're going to hear about some of the consumer trends and demands, what some of these new services are doing to influence, I guess, the future of travel. How you can, as people listening in today, how you can deliver and incorporate data into the heart of what you're doing, and really some of the kind of best practices around, API selection and things like that. And then we're going to hear from Patrick later on about some of the things that Hopper are doing. As always, we've interspersed, not interspersed on this occasion. What we're doing, we want to do some quick fire questions with you all today. To just kind of get a sense of where you, the audience, are in your world of data and personalization and applications generally. So you're going to get 3 questions now. All you need to do is follow the instructions on the screen and answer as quickly as you can, and then we will get through to the presentation. So Gene, behind the scenes, if we can have the first question. And it's a very simple one, as always. We just want to familiarize yourself with the system. Where are you located? I hope this one's an easy one for you all, but if you could select your answer there as quickly as possible, please. Okay. Not a particularly difficult one, because I can see here that almost all of you have voted. So let's have the answers to that question up now, please. And almost 2/3 of you, 65%, are in North America, just over a quarter in EMEA. Asia Pacific and Latin America, single digits. Asia Pacific, we're never particularly surprised about, given that it is very late or indeed in the middle of the night already. So thank you very much. So the next question is hopefully a little bit more difficult, but will be absolutely more relevant to the subject at hand. So let's have the second question up for you there today, please. And it's, how many sites does the average traveller visit when planning their trip? Now, I guess this is your perception. So how many sites does the average traveller visit when planning their trip? 12, 50, 38, 5 and 22. Rather random order there, of course. We like to keep you thinking. But if you could select one of those, please. And I think just a couple more moments. And let's have those results now, Gene, please. Okay, almost a tie there for first place, I beg your pardon. 35% say 12 sites, 38%, the winner, say 5 sites. And as you can see there from the other results, far fewer of you apart from the 22 sites at 18%. Now, Google years gone by did say that I think it was around 18 sites was the typical figure there. So some interesting points of view. And let's have our Gene.
Kev, this is Gene chiming in. Actually, the correct answer there is 38. C is the correct answer, and that comes from a recent survey of Expedia Media Solutions using data from ComScore.
Interesting.
So
okay,
our pals at Sabre shared that, and I was quite amazed because I'd been hearing the number 22 or in the low 20s range, so that's quite interesting there.
Okay, so the official winner there is 38, but only 8% of you got it. So anyway, let's have the third and final question for the audience there today, please. How much of your site or application contains content or code not created on your own or by yourself? So, none, quarter, half, three quarters, or all of it. Be surprised if anyone says 100%, but let's see what people think. Okay, I can see the answers are coming in a lot slower. People's brains whirring around. Just have a few more moments just before, and then we will show the results. Okay, let's have the results up, Gene, please. Of course, there isn't a correct answer to this one, so just almost a third of you are saying around a quarter of your site or application contains third-party content or code. A quarter of you are saying around half, and as you can see there, the other results. 15% are doing it all themselves, none. So, thank you very much to everybody. I believe is that the last of the polls? Yes, it is. So, thank you very much to everybody for voting there. And now, as I'm saying, we've got a great lineup, a trio here of experts. We're going to talk you through some of the background and where we are, where we're going, and then we'll hear from Patrick at the end from Hopper. But I'm delighted to hand over to Sean Marine. As I said earlier, he's the Director of Online and Emerging Business at Sabre. He's in Texas. It's probably going to be a little bit warmer there than it is here in the UK. But good morning to you, Sean, and the floor is yours. Looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thanks, Gene. Thanks, Kevin. Echoing Kevin, good morning and good afternoon or evening to everybody. On behalf of Vero, Patrick, and myself, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to attend our seminar. We really do hope you find it interesting and insightful. So with that, I'll kick it off by reviewing a few key trends and specific examples of ways in which our industry and adjacent industries are really pioneering new ways to inspire, shop, and transact. So Gene, or Kevin, if you'll move to the next slide. So now, I know many on this call have probably heard more than their fill of presentations regarding big data, mobile, social, merchandising, and media. So we opted to take a slightly different angle. If you look at the core of what's driving many noteworthy innovations as of late, three are really three primary areas that consistently come to mind: context, content, and convenience. While I can see that this is a rather elementary framework, I do think it distills the view down to the fundamental drivers of new commercial opportunities, most notably in the digital economy. Think about it this way. Content creation is growing exponentially with countless contributors, whether it be blogs, photos, promotions, listings, you name it. Evidenced by one commonly cited statistic, over 90% of all data in the world has been generated in the last 2 years, and that factoid is actually slightly dated. So with more and more content available, more context is needed. Technology and tools, data models and data labels, tags, reviews, preferences, search engines, social graphs, knowledge graphs, they're all designed to improve our ability to really assimilate and associate information. Some of them are obvious, some of them are opaque, some are expressed, some are inferred, but they really are all there and advancing at a very rapid pace. With greater context comes greater efficiency. People are able to absorb information a lot faster, make more informed decisions, but that doesn't magically happen. So paramount to this is how easily and intuitively information can be accessed, presented, and consumed. So in other words, it also has to be convenient to win mind share. I've often joked that I'll tell the truth. Older I get, the more I'll pay for convenience, whether it be a matter of having a faster workflow, ease or ubiquity of access and transactability, or just a better general user experience. They all drive value. Therefore, the greater the context and convenience, the more content we seemingly desire. So therein lays somewhat of an element of cyclicality. So if you want to move ahead. I've been quoted in the past that we're currently witnessing a three-way collision between search, social, and retail. At the macro level, this may sound a bit cliche, but let's take it down a level. So, for instance, how frequently are sites like Pinterest or Facebook now searched versus Google for recipes? What makes an appliance deal you found online good, and how much credence do you place solely on the retailer? Or conversely, how often do you rely on the automated intelligence of iTunes or the social wisdom of Spotify to provide a quality music recommendation? We now live in a world really where search spans well beyond a list of website links, where social is more than a simple news feed and retail is no longer a siloed storefront. But with ambiguity really does come opportunity. So if we can advance. So let's go back to my earlier framework. Who generates content and what are some of the key trends in this area? Well, examples of common creation sources I think everybody would intuitively note would be suppliers, continuously bundling and unbundling, adding new products and services, consumers, contributing and sharing opinions, research, or experiences, intermediaries, for example, retailers, creating unique and expansive choices for the marketplace, or even developers through mashups and open source platforms, they often as well generate new forms of content. So if you'll advance, please. So each of the above contribute to the ever-increasing amount of data out there with different value attributes and different views of that content through different lenses. Although social mashups are nothing new, they are driving new consumer behaviors. So take my earlier example where one searches for recipes. Specific to travel, I myself have found much more inclined as of late to, during the inspirational phase, frequent less conventional means. An example of that may be a site many here have heard of called The Chive. In their less racy travel category, one can come through a mammoth repository of truly amazing imagery of destinations and events throughout the world. Would this have been a normal practice for vacation planning 5 years ago? Probably not. Or take Waze, for instance, a popular app for community-based traffic information. Such apps really have grown significantly in popularity as the quality and coverage of crowdsourced content expands. Would we have been comfortable relying on such a source of information to get to work in the past? Further, new sites spring up daily, hip hostels, black jets, residential rooms, custom crafts. The array of what's available to us at times is truly dizzying. So if you'll advance to the next slide, please. So simply marveling at all the ways new content is created, or the vast amounts, is of little value without parallel advancements in context. So several areas contribute to providing greater relevance, but let's take a look at a few examples. Recommendations, whether professional, personal, or artificially driven through data, all continue to play a key role in refining one's perspective. Awareness, where you are, for instance, what you're doing, what device you're using, or what stage you are in any given process, clearly can change the nature of how content is viewed or used. Association, or put another way, the ability to identify relevant interrelationships within content, is no new concept. But with continuing advancements in data storage, modeling, analytics, it's driving new value. And finally, preferencing, or preference. Whether stated or observed, there are no shortage of usage and how user preferences and priorities continue to drive innovative ways to deliver greater content. So if we'll advance to slide 7, please. Though I'd argue that Hopper is highly focused on all three categories I'm covering today, one in particular that they are striving to make an art form is in the realm of contextual travel search. Though through massive data computations and permutations coupled with an innovative approach to content mapping and organization, they really are working to build the knowledge graph of travel. Are restaurant reviews anything new? No, they're really not. I mean, they're a dime a dozen, but NES is aiming to get smarter by the day through adaptive learning, not just whether you like a cuisine or a restaurant, but which dishes are your favorites based on what's nearby, based on what your friends like, and based on what you're presently in the mood for. Or another example that has become the staple for many online retailers now, Amazon continues to adapt and perfect their personalization engine based on an amazing amount of data and variables. If you can advance to the next slide, please. So, if the ever-growing complexity and amount of content drives the need for greater context, and significant advancements in context drives greater clarity, what remains at the core of our expectations? That would be convenient methods to access and consume contextually relevant content. As I mentioned previously, convenience is really an intrinsic value. We don't always know it when we see it, but we often see it when it's missing. In this multi-device, multi-channel world, continuity is playing an increasingly critical role. Security, rather more of an inconvenience. I really think I have more passwords than I do Facebook friends. Advancements continue to make authentication an easier experience. Take, for example, here, the tap or trail methods, where you touch certain points of a picture or trailing a pattern on your finger with your device to gain access. That said, rest assured that as security methods evolve, so will hacking. So leave that nice little comfortable thought. Payment, so micro purchases, virtual wallets, one-click checkouts, merchant in the box, they all are examples of creating a more efficient buying process, particularly with on-site or online digital transactions. So I guess while 3D printing is still in its infancy to enable instant delivery physical product, we can at least buy them faster. And lastly, but not least by any stretch, is presentation. So in the past decade, the importance of the user experience has taken a giant leap to its rightful place, really in front of all product and business decisions. So adaptive design, predictive interactions, gesture-based commands are no longer neat, nice-to-haves, but rather fundamental components of today's most common applications. If we could advance, please. So how does this translate into new ways to capitalize on convenience? There are several notable examples, but given our time constraints, I'm only going to call out a few. For example, living device-free, no remote, no problem. Flutter is an example of a new gesture-based solution for controlling music and movies with the swipe of a hand. Or on-demand services. What if you're in a bind in a foreign country and you really need instant translation? We'll consider Verbalize It, a new service that provides access to a network of global interpreters ready to assist at the click of a button. Or lastly, Uber, which has taken channel, payment, and presentation to a new level to make historically non-traditional means of transportation fairly mainstream now. Add the context of knowing where you are and where drivers are, and you've improved an entire industry riddled with vastly idle capacity through a single company, now with a $3.4 billion market cap. Now that I've covered a few key trends and examples shaping how search, social, and retail are harnessing content, context, and convenience, I'd like to pass it on to my colleague Errol Arkin, who will pull back the curtain to give you a behind-the-scenes view of ways in which these components are exposed to the marketplace and how you can best capitalize on them. So take it away, Errol.
Thank you, Sean. I think when we talk about embracing this innovation, there's really, to participate, to embrace, there's really two models that we need to consider. The software as a service, which is really the out-of-the-box pre-built applications that are ready to use from the day you buy them, versus platform as a service, where we have the quick, flexible APIs and data and content delivered through a centralized platform designed for the ease of use, and it allows the developer community to come together and really come up with some really innovative ideas like the one Sean just shared. I'm going to focus a little bit on platform as a service, as I think from our perspective it's the common denominator for a lot of the examples Sean just showed. So if you go to the next slide, please. The platforms are the foundational component of inspiring travel because they deliver that content to power those unique application experiences, allowing the innovators to build that context and convenience from there. Businesses that operate the platform as a service model primarily focus on the way they package and deliver the valuable data that the customers are willing to pay for so they can build applications. These platforms may be invisible to the consumer, but they are a huge business and a growing one. Even the common technology brands familiar to consumers and end users like Facebook, Expedia, Amazon.com, a significant portion, if not the majority, of the revenue of their business comes from the platform as a service part to the tunes of billions of dollars. So when we look at the most robust and compelling platforms across different industries, we really see three key tenets that are critical to embrace: adaptability, responsiveness, and the developer experience. Next, please. So let's first talk a little bit about adaptability. This is probably the most technical of the three tenets, which means it can be tricky to describe without getting into a whole new vocabulary. But it's also one that when the platform provider gets it right, it's the one that sustains conversations with the customers about how effectively it's delivering value. So there's some measurements that we kind of crystallized down into three areas here. The first one is the different ways to present the technology for consumption. Primarily, it's done in two ways, either data or an API. APIs, which is the technology that links apps to the source of the data, has become a bit of a buzzword in the technology industry, but it continues to be the most efficient and scalable way for describing to a developer what data they can provide as an input to a search and what data they're going to get back from a search to generate that content that they're looking for. It's essentially data on demand. Data feeds provide data in bulk that can be reused again and again. Now, technology and modern networks allow for massive amounts of data to be transmitted at once and for that volume of data to be reused until the application feels like it's stale and time to refresh. But the choice of which way to consume this data has an effect on the cost of operating these applications and how accurate the information is, which ultimately leads to how powerful the experience is and the loyalty that it drives from the customer. The next measurement is definitely technical, API protocols, but it's also still a bit of a debate amongst the technology community and something that's a trend that is very important to constantly monitor. SOAP is essentially the tried and true protocol for APIs. It's secure, it's robust, it's consistent, It's not going away, but the trends around convenience, like Sean was describing, are driving a need to request data in a totally different context. So this is where we see the explosion of REST as signified in the chart here. Over the last few years, you talk about that most businesses want that hockey stick growth, and I think REST is definitely on that trend. The explosion of REST, which is essentially an acronym for representational state transfer, is driven by the desire to unbundle services and allow for lighter weight payloads of the data that's coming back to the consuming application. Typically, when you think about some of the electronic marketplaces like eBay or Amazon or even Sabre's travel marketplace, you think in terms of the full workflow of searching, shopping, purchasing, fulfilling. But there's a growing trend where customers expect to either do some of those steps independently or allow for the data that comes from each of those steps to be mashed up or combined with data from completely different unrelated sources to improve that convenience in the context of the user experience. Precision versus quantity is all about how much work you expect the platform to do for you versus how much the application wants to control what is ultimately presented to the end user. So if you expect the platform to refine the result down to something very specific and relatable, then you're looking for APIs or for data feeds that are very almost customized to your business needs or the application's needs, versus having some basic search that will return a broader set of data that the application can use to present more options to the end user. This has implications to the customer satisfaction either way. Having too much precision means you might miss out on opportunity just outside the border of what the user was asking for, or too broad a set of data might overwhelm the user and lead to some dissatisfaction about the convenience of the application and constantly having to refine the search. It's the responsibility of the platform provider to have the right mix of APIs and searches to give a blend of very precise and very broad with lots of high quantity of data. Next, please. So the second of the trends is probably the easiest to measure, and responsiveness. Speed is probably the most obvious dimension that jumps out, but it's really more than that. So if we go to the next slide. As applications mature, there's always going to be a demand for more and better capabilities by the existing users and to embrace new types of users. In terms of speed, there are three ways to really think about how you measure it. One is getting the same data as before, but in less time. The other is getting more data than you were previously getting, but in the same amount of time as before. But what applications really want and need is more data in less time, and it's continuing that trend. This is where the decision around APIs versus data feeds and how effectively you use a platform become a big consideration, and what scale the platform can work at play into whether they're able to provide more data in less time. While speed is important, it still can't compromise security. More platforms are moving towards a trend of having more personal data, and there needs to be more secure rigor as you start to get into data privacy, personal credit card information, personally identifiable information, and lots of industry standards that are coming up around what is allowed to be transmitted, what is allowed to be stored. So there needs to be a simplicity in that security so that it doesn't increase the development time, it doesn't increase the response time, it doesn't increase the overhead of the applications in any way, which can degrade the user's experience. Ability to measure the quantity has real-life ramifications to people's lives. The data is inaccurate. Imagine saying that we're giving you results that can instantly be purchased, so they anticipate being able to afford a travel that they wanted, only learn that it wasn't actually available. This is the quickest way to lose a customer's loyalty. It's a very complex thing to get right because you want to have that dimension of speed, but not at too much of the cost of accuracy. So it's a constant balancing act, a constantly moving stick for measurement. Next, please. So the third tenet is the developer experience. The impression the developer has when they first are investigating a platform is important not only because a developer expects to quickly learn the technical details so they can start building prototypes and initial versions that turn their idea into a product, but it's also important that the experience be sustainable and build a sense of community amongst developers that further sparks innovation, further identifies opportunity to create the kind of solutions shared. Next, please. So we look at 4 key areas in the developer experience. The first, self-service, is really all about the developer or the builder of applications being able to learn everything they need to do on their own so that they can immediately move into the prototyping phase or building out the actual product. Rapid prototyping is something that is served by having test tools that provide sample data or examples that allow you to quickly spin up an application so that the builders of these applications can show their idea to the authorities, if you will, be it their customers or within their own teams, so that the technical concept is made easy to understand, that the context convenience comes across using some sample content that's very quickly accessed. The sense of community, I think we've touched on it a couple times in this call, is also very important, to where developers can identify opportunities to leverage the best of both of their solutions or bring together multiple solutions into an even more powerful single solution. And then something specific to the travel industry we see is this industry orientation. There's a lot of terminology, a lot of acronyms, a lot of words and phrases that we take for granted. Even something like a city pair is an example for those in the travel industry that makes complete crystal sense to them. But if you talk to someone that was in a manufacturing business, would they understand what a city pair was? And that's something that's pervasive across all the different ways of shopping and searching for travel products. So being able to orient developers that are coming in to build applications consuming travel data but are not travel products themselves is where you need to make sure that they're quickly oriented to the kind of terminology that's going to exist amongst the community, the kind of terminology that's going to be used in technical documentation, etc. Next, please. So obviously platform providers should put most of their focus on the opportunity and positive outcomes in those three tenets that we talked about. But it's important to keep an eye on some of the common pitfalls in sourcing this content. A platform provider not building for scale means that the idea may seem really compelling and seem like the right approach to go to, but very quickly as your application, your business succeeds, the performance, the responsiveness of that platform starts to degrade. So it's important that there be the ability to scale. It doesn't mean that instantly the platform has to be at scale, but it must be, the builders of applications must expect and have clarity from the providers about how they can scale to meet their needs so that they grow together. And then the second one is an overdependence on in-house infrastructure, and that obviously relates very much to the scale. Having to rely too much on ordering, maintaining, connecting, configuring hardware and other elements of the infrastructure yourself, or even the network connections for the bandwidth, can lead to some overhead costs and some overhead from a responsiveness to your customers' needs. There's a lot of solutions out there that get into some of the cool buzzwords like clouds and web services. But essentially the platform should be something where you're focusing mostly on getting the data in that adaptability, in that responsiveness you need, not having to worry about the plumbing, if you will, that's powering that. Next, please. So in summary, what do platforms need to do to spark the innovation that leads to applications like the one Sean was sharing? As many of you know, Sabre operates the world's largest travel marketplace, and therefore we have a robust platform for all sorts of innovators to power their applications related to travel or to use travel data in their applications for other industries, other areas. We embrace these tenets, and we continue to work on some new capabilities to evolve our developer experience as that first impression and sustaining impression, but also constantly measure ourselves on the content that we're providing, the context that it powers, and the objective measurables like speed and convenience. So there's some more information that in other forums we continue to share, and there's some information available within Sabre's realm about the kinds of products and services that we have. I want to segue to Patrick. I'm delighted to hand it over to him, who will talk about how they're embracing some of the trends and platform tenets for their own ideas. So I'll turn it over to you, Patrick.
Just before we do, it's Kevin here again. Just a quick reminder, we do have a dedicated Q&A at the end of today's webinar. I did mean to mention that earlier. So if anyone does have any questions, you can do so by submitting them using the questions button on the right-hand side of your dashboard, and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end after we've heard from Patrick. And sorry for jumping in there, Patrick, but over to you, sir.
No problem, and thanks very much for the opportunity. I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about what we're building here at Hopper. So let's go to the next slide. I think it's a great example of some of the trends that Sean and Errol were talking about in terms of, bringing together the right content, making that convenient for users, and helping change the travel planning process. So that's really our mission, is to try to understand and provide a compelling way for users earlier in that travel planning process. When you've decided you want to go on vacation next summer and you want to go to the beach, but you don't know exactly where, you don't know exactly when, you recognize that you have days of those 38 websites ahead of you trying to figure out where you're going to go, and at the end of the day, at least in my own experience, I always feel like I'm I'm bound to have missed out on something, right? It's a painful process. And that's one of the reasons that convinced me to join Hopper, is that, feeling that pain myself. It feels like we've done a great job of disintermediating the travel agent with all the online travel agencies that we have now. But we've kind of lost that experience, that good travel agent who knew who you were and what you like to do, that they had, and able to give you advice about where to go. So this opening screen here is just a kind of view of what you might get on Hopper if you search for skiing in the United States. So you've decided you want to take a ski vacation, you're not sure where to go. You can type in skiing, and you'll get a whole set of results that show you, places that you might ski, which are popular because we know other people like to ski there, and there's lots of stuff to do with skiing in and around those places. And you can see that we've given you an ability not just to browse lots of places and understand more about them, but also understand what's involved in getting there. So we're giving you an idea of pricing. You can see what it might cost to fly there during a particular time window, which could be quite broad. So in this case, you're seeing some examples of the best flights from Boston to Reno in January, right? And it's allowing you to shop a long time window, again, to kind of give you that exploratory process to decide whether this is potentially something you're interested in. Right? So that's what we're trying to build. If we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about some of the data that we're collecting in order to bring this experience to life. And kind of my involvement in figuring out how we can use that data to make that user experience more compelling, and also to make sure that we reach the broadest audience possible in terms of kind of syndicating those data products that we're able to generate. So on one side, as Sean talked about earlier, one of the things that we've been doing for quite a while now is organizing travel content from all over the web about all sorts of places in the world, right? It's about pulling together websites that might talk about things you might do when you travel or vacation, understanding what things there are that get talked about on those web pages and where they are, so that lots of people might write about the Royal Opera House. There may be all sorts of websites that have information about it, but we want to make sure that we can present that as one thing, right? And we want to know where it is. We want to be able to attach all these different aspects of that thing, so that we can present them to you as a user in a consistent and convenient way, along with all the links out, so that if you want to go and explore in detail where we found these things, you can do that. We can bring it to all those related sites. And we also are integrating not just kind of official websites, but all the huge kind of cloud of travel blogging content. So there's lots and lots of people out there, some professionally writing, some semi-professional, but many who just write because they love to travel, who are sharing real experiences about places that they've visited. And often that content is the most useful in this inspirational phase of understanding whether that's a place that you might be interested in going to, rather than reading a kind of an official review, reading a blog that someone's written about what it's like to be in the Royal Opera House. It's going to help you decide. So trying to bring all that travel-related content together on the one side, and then on the next slide, combining that with this ability to take that content and look at it in the most convenient way. So on an iPad, for example, when you're sitting on the couch thinking about that beach holiday, giving you an ability to browse the content that we're pulling together in, again, a coherent way. So rather than jumping across 38 different websites, here it is presented in magazine-style format, for example, where I can just flip through, see lots of pictures, see kind of summaries of what people are talking about on these Cape Cod beaches, and again, figure out where it is that I want to end up to narrow down my travel planning option. So on the next slide, kind of orthogonally to all of that travel content, that sort of graph of the world's travel, a compelling part of the Hopper experience is that we're pulling together what we're calling crowdsourced flight shopping. So we're collecting from a number of different sources live feeds of what consumers are shopping for in terms of trips, so that as a user, you go onto an online travel agency and you search for a flight to from Boston to Paris. We see a price for that that flight solution. We don't see anything about you as a user, but we get to understand what people are shopping for right now from multiple sources. We're collecting about 1 billion priced flight solutions a day, and that gives us a unique insight both into what people are looking at in terms of demand, but also obviously what pricing trends look like. So we're able to use that to present a different approach to flight shopping. Rather than asking the user to type in an origin and a destination and a particular date window that they want to travel, we can present a user interface like the one I showed at the start, where we can show you what it costs to go skiing in January in the United States across all sorts of different departure and arrival dates, all sorts of different destinations, and roll that up in lots of different ways. So again, giving a much more user-centric perspective on what it means to buy a ski vacation than we've traditionally done. So we use that flight shopping data in a couple of different ways. One is that we're obviously using a kind of a rolling cache of that information to provide pricing suggestions back to users, so that we don't have to do live shopping every time a user's looking for a trip. And we're also able to use that data to understand these kind of longer-term trends. So, what's popular, when do people like to shop particular routes, when are people trying to go to particular places. And I'll show you some examples of that as we go forward. So let's go to the next slide. This idea of working with crowdsourced flight shopping has both challenges and opportunities. Because it's representative of what people are actually shopping for, that tells us a lot of interesting things about what might be of interest to users as we learn what they want to look at. But it also means that there are potentially gaps, right? So here's a little picture of what the coverage looks like for one particular market. So this is flying from New York to Tel Aviv, and it shows you this kind of picture of when you leave versus when you come back. So you see this big diagonal stripe where people tend to travel for between a week to 2 weeks in this market, and you can kind of get a sense of the heat map of when people are shopping, which dates are popular. But you can see that we have to figure out what to do when you shop for a date that no one else has looked at, right? So there's a challenge like that. If you go to the next slide, there's also challenges around pricing accuracy. So we want to understand if we have a price that we saw maybe a couple of days ago, at what point is that unreliable, right? So we want to be able to track how these prices change over time, so that we can decide whether we show a price to a user or not, or take some other action, right? And you can see that for some markets, we can continually kind of improve in our performance in how we manage that history, what we keep and what we present and so forth. You see these kind of green regions where we're very close to the actual price, broadening over time. And in other examples, odd things happen. So if you look at that picture at the bottom, traveling from Newark to Istanbul, it looks like there was a sale or something happened. So all of a sudden our accuracy, we started being too high for that market, right? So understanding automatically how to deal with that and project that is an interesting challenge around this data. If we move to the next slide, I just talk about a couple of the opportunities that we have. One is to understand demand, right? So because we're trying to shop across broad ranges of departure and arrival dates, to understand, you want to take a trip for 3 days during the summer, we want to help users understand what that broad calendar looks like. So we can do some interesting things like trying to understand which dates are popular, not just by looking at what dates are getting booked right now, but correcting for the fact that people tend to be lazy, right? People tend to only book their travel 30 days ahead of time, and so that if you look right now at people booking for Christmas, there's not necessarily a lot of demand, but we can correct for what we think the underlying demand should be, and we can actually then pop out what those dates are. So if you see the two examples here on the left, you've got Boston to Paris. You can see that being in Paris over the Christmas and New Year period is very popular, right? So that's much higher demand than we'd otherwise expect. And then the demand tapers off into the spring, or late winter, I guess. If you look at Denver, you get a different sort of picture. Again, being in Denver over the Christmas period is popular, not so much over New Year's. And then you see all of a sudden in February, the spring break period is very, people want to be skiing. So those dates pop out. So you can start to present this kind of information in a way that helps consumers understand, when's a good time to be there, how does that relate to the pricing, shown in the little charts below, and give people different ways to understand the context of this vacation decision they're making so that they feel at the end of the day they've made a better decision, more informed. If we move to the next slide, just one last example. Two last examples. One is, this is about looking at kind of what relative costs of markets might be, and this is a kind of a research activity at the moment for us, being able to compare different markets. If you want to go skiing, you have the option of flying to the West Coast or flying to the Alps, right? And if you look at all of the things being equal, it's a lot cheaper to fly to the West Coast than to fly to the Alps. So we can start to kind of present this information about which markets we think might be overpriced, underpriced, relative to a particular theme that you're interested in shopping for. And then the last example, just carrying on that kind of skiing analogy, if we move to the next slide, we'll show you this, I think, unique ability that Hopper has to combine our knowledge of what it means to travel and why you might travel different places in the world with what it costs and what the demand is to travel to those different places. So if you look, this first picture shows a summary of where Hopper thinks skiing is in the world. So it takes all the stuff we know about skiing and kind of draws this heat map. You can see that there's lots of skiing in the Alps. There's a lot of ski destinations on the East Coast, and then there's ski destinations scattered all over the West Coast and so forth. If we then project what we know about flight shopping demand onto this picture, so we go to the next slide, you see it kind of shifts. So a lot of our shopping demand is U.S.-centric, and you can see that the Alps get dimmer, right? There's not that many people who are flying from the U.S. or shopping to travel to the Alps to ski. And even within the U.S., the picture changes a lot. Although there were a lot of ski resorts on the East Coast, the places people are actually going to ski are out in the West, right? And as an East Coast person, I know that it's better to ski on the West Coast. You can see the Rockies, the Cascades. You can see Banff really lights up in this picture. So this is now going to give us an ability when somebody comes to Hopper and says, hey, I want to ski and I've got $500, we can have a much better sense of, where's the right place for you to go and where's the place to suggest that you might never have thought of. But again, provides you a whole level of comfort that, you're finding the right destination for that vacation and you're not trapped in this kind of morass of unassisted web search to end up with your final decision. So at that point, I just want to turn it back so we have a little bit of time for Q&A, and thank everybody for joining us today.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. I'm actually very curious, Gene, if you could just go back to that slide with the ski resorts on there. Thanks ever so much. And I can see a small mark on there for which looks like Dallas. So I've not been to Dallas for a very long time, but I can't remember many ski resorts there. So is that dry ski resorts? I mean, how is that data being kind of populated into a map here? And also I can see ones in London here. There's really not a lot of skiing in London. So how's that kind of working out?
Well, and exactly, this is, as I said, this is a kind of a research activity. This is completely automated, right? So this has had no human curation. It's just based on what we've collected, mashed up with the flight data that we have. And there are certainly places that look odd in this picture. I think actually, I don't see Dallas, but I see, Vegas always shows up on these pictures because you get huge traffic going to Vegas, and there's somewhere that identifies themselves as a ski-related destination, right? So there's lots of ways that we can tweak this, but I think in broad brush you see that it provides a really interesting layer of knowledge that we didn't have before, right? If you just take the idea that skiing is in the Alps, but that's not actually where people are trying to ski, this allows us to be, at least statistically speaking, much more accurate about the recommendation that we make. And certainly there's lots of tweaks. We need to go in and overlay some human curation on top of the kind of raw data that we're collecting. We're beginning to do that process.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. And I'm going to welcome back Sean and Errol now. We've got a few questions that have come in for the last 5 minutes or so. So I guess for Sean or Errol, let's go with Sean. I mean, this is kind of related to one of the questions that we've had. And, some of this kind of stuff really blows people's heads away, really, because, and I'm thinking specifically about some of your, in inverted commas, traditional customers. And I'm thinking sharp-end, coal-faced, travel agency type guys. Those that are doing the real legwork that still keeps this industry motoring along. And you just sometimes wonder whether this either goes over their heads or they're eagerly listening in and they're thinking, really, how do I get into this, or how do I get some of my folk into this? I mean, what would you say to some of those that may fear that they're being left behind by some of this kind of this development in the industry that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes or so?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would certainly hope they're listening in, just because I think everybody benefits from new ideas and different ways to do business. And as you said, they clearly remain a critical part of the travel value chain, and I believe will continue to provide service and support in ways in which will continue to allow the industry to thrive. There are, as you have just seen and as we've talked about, a lot of new entrants as well that have very new and innovative ways to either shop for travel or provide travel-related services that are very exploitable, even with existing traditional travel agencies. Not to deviate from this particular topic, but just a pure example of that is with the Red App Center. So a lot of new ideas and new ways to access and shop for different types of content with some of these new sites through Sabre's Red App SDK can actually easily be integrated into the traditional agency workflow for they themselves to access and provide and extend onto their customers as well. Just as a case in point where we really are looking to broaden the ecosystem for all entrants and existing participants to play. Okay, thanks.
One of the questions, there's been a couple of questions here that are around the same kind of topic. So, and I guess we'll have Hopper second, and let's have Errol answer this one. I mean, people are saying, what are some of the popular methods for, frankly, getting hold of all of this data? I mean, how do you do it? And indeed, I guess one of the, if there is a legal ramification for all this, I mean, how do you handle getting permission to use this content? So let's go with the Errol and Sabre first, and then maybe Patrick at Hopper can talk about how they in particular have gone about just getting their dirty hands on all this data to essentially improve the experience of people. Errol first.
Yeah, I think these are getting to a maturity curve where the information that's made available to people who will build these kind of applications, the contracts that need to be signed, all the data security, privacy, all that kind of stuff, is becoming more intuitive. Also, the unbundling is a key aspect to it, where you're not just becoming a full subscriber of the full platform. You can now have a conversation to just focus in and purchase, if you will, the service and the data that is really what you're thinking, and then use over time be able to become familiar with that, and then move to the next phase and growing more and more in the APIs and data feeds you use from various platform providers, and then kind of the familiarity curve increases from there. So I think the key is that you look at, I think I alluded to the fact that well-known end-user kind of consumer brands like Facebook and Amazon, all that kind of stuff, they have a platform as a service angle behind them. So what the end user knows, what the average consumer knows, you're just saying this is sort of the data version of the website you're used to seeing. And then that kind of starts the orientation of the conversation. I think a perfect example of this is actually a success is, Sean alluded to the example we do at Sabre from a B2B application perspective, but even just the prevalence of iPhone applications and the kinds of people that are building those are not traditional, robust professional developers. Those are kids, if you will, in a garage on their laptop building up applications, and all the technical jargon that typically would go along is made simple because there's a very robust developer toolkit. The APIs and the data feeds to get access to that kind of stuff are also very robust and mature. So I think there's a maturity in this platform as a service space now to where it's not something overwhelming that you have to be a long-standing system programmer or developer type. I think it's something that's now much easier for different constituents to get into this.
Right. Okay. And Patrick, I mean, if you could, talk briefly about how you've done, achieved this at Hopper. How did you get your sources? Did you go about getting permission and all those kind of things?
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's different aspects for different kinds of data. So with flight shopping, for example, we have contractual agreements in place with a number of providers to get access to that. But we want to be very careful about personally identifiable data. We don't want to be have the kind of creepiness factor. And as I say, we don't know anything about the person who actually made a shop. We just get to see the results that were presented. In fact, we don't even get to know the question that the shopper asked. We just see the answer. With a lot of the unstructured data, a lot of that is in the public domain already. And a lot of what we're doing is trying to assemble links to that data. We're not trying to present it as our own content. We're trying to organize and catalog it. And I think in a lot of cases, there's actually kind of virtuous cycle in that the producers of that content are interested in getting access to broader audience and broader reach, and having the ability to have their information in context of other related information is actually powerful for them as well as us. So it's not necessarily, I guess the value that we're adding is in the kind of intersection of these different data sources. So when we talk to travel bloggers, for example, a lot of them are quite interested in this ability that we could potentially provide a platform for them to get their content out to a wider audience, and have other useful kind of material surrounding it so that it kind of adds value to what they're producing. So I think that's kind of the direction that we're going.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. As typical, as in London buses, you wait for ages and then loads come along at once. We've had loads of questions come in, so we're going to try and get through as many of these as possible. And rest assured, those that we don't get a chance to, we'll send them on to the guys here on the panel today, and hopefully they'll come back. Right, a question here. This one's for you, Sean. MHB asks, for independent app developers who would really like to have access to live streams of flight prices, queries and things like that, how can they have access to the data? Because they're arguing here, is the data only available to well-funded companies who can pay millions in licensing fees? Therefore, are you concerned that this is going to limit the actual innovation in the space if it is limiting in terms of cost?
That actually is a great question, and I would be, or I am happy to answer that it's actually quite the contrary. You'll actually be seeing here shortly, not to convey too much now, a brand new environment that we're rolling out that will definitely allow us to reach a much broader audience of developers to the point of the question that may be very small and may have unique needs within the access of our platform, and a commercial model that actually reflects that as well, to ensure that we are facilitating the innovation that we're talking about here today. That said, there's no necessary reason to wait until some of these new capabilities are out there, as evidenced by a couple of examples made throughout the presentation. We are, and others like us, have been working with small startups continuously to help facilitate some of these new innovations and applications, and we would be more than happy to have conversations with anybody on the call that is interested in accessing the services we have available today.
Okay, so the shorter answer there is get in touch and also watch this space. So thank you very much,
yes.
Sean. Just two more questions then. This is one back to you, Patrick. And this is as a publisher or as an editor, I'm fascinated by what your answer might be for this. So Simon asks, if you're taking all these sources of data, and it's indeed content, who owns the SEO with content published on Hopper or on any other site from external sources? So, for example, you've got Wikipedia content published on the site. So a question that I think is very important in this world of Google and Duke content, how do you get around that? Who owns the SEO?
So I guess I'm not sure what you mean by who owns the SEO. I mean, part of what we're trying to do, obviously, is find ways to drive audience to Hopper. But
yeah, I think I think maybe I think the word owns is probably the wrong word there from our question. I think it's who benefits from the SEO.
Right.
Duping everywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly not enough. As I said before, it's not enough for us just to reproduce content from another source. We would generate no SEO traffic at all if we just reproduced Wikipedia on our own, non-authoritative website. I mean, Wikipedia is the authority, right? So the way that we can add value is in this combination of data sources from other places. And we're not trying to steal content from Wikipedia and pass it off as our own. We're trying to say, here's Wikipedia's view of the Eiffel Tower. Here's the Eiffel Tower's official tickets page. Here's ways you can get to the Eiffel Tower. Here's the stuff that you can visit while you're near the Eiffel Tower, and present all that context. That's information that you can't get anywhere else, and provides a way for a user to explore and get back to all those original sources. So I think, as I said, it's a kind of virtuous cycle potentially that we can generate audience by having this combination, and then we increase the flow back to these these detailed reference sources. And certainly there's discussions with the owners of the content. So as I say, we're with travel bloggers in particular. There's lots of interesting content. Some of them don't want anything to do with us putting their content on our site because they're trying to monetize it on their own. But lots of other people are very interested in that idea of mutual benefit and broadening the audience.
Okay, so as I said, I've saved all the questions. There are, Patrick, quite a few specific questions about Hopper and business models and all these kind of things, which I will send to you as well, and hopefully you can get back to those that have asked very specific questions about Hopper. But the last question I'm going to put to you, Errol, obviously some of the things that have come in here today, people saying, we need to kind of scratching our heads a little bit, and this does seem quite future-gazing. If we could transport ourselves to October 2016 momentarily, we're obviously a little bit more wrinkly and older and grey haired, but I mean, would you sense that the industry as a whole will be having this kind of conversation in 3 years' time, or do you feel that it is on the crest of a wave, to use a cliche, that we are about to see an abundance of really dynamic data-led kind of services?
I honestly think that it's more an evolution than a revolution. There are the sophisticated corporate business travelers who travel all the time and are really looking for deep insights. And then there's the other end, which is the people not used to travel that want a very simple answer. And I think some of those dimensions will want that data-driven, very personalized kind of feel, and the platform that's providing the content. Sorry, it seemed to have cut out. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You carry on, Errol.
Sorry. Yeah, so I'm not sure where I left off, but yeah, I think the need for personalized content from the platforms to spark all this innovation and change that, we'll need to get into embracing big data, data intelligence, things like that. But I still think fundamentally there's this difference between innovation and different models versus having something that is robust, scalable, and reliable. And I think it still needs to start from the platforms that start all this. A flight is still going to be a flight where you take a seat and you fly from point A to point B. Now, how you find that, I think, is really where, as Sean talked about, the context and the convenience. But I think that there's a content part that still needs to be very very reliable, and also not only meet the needs of the consumer, but also meeting the needs of the provider of that content, the supplier, if you will. So I think the evolution will be on how the supplier's packaging the products, and then how that is put into data that's transmitted, as opposed to it just being a shift by, like you said, October 2016, where it's suddenly a totally different world of travel. So I think you'll see some really innovative players. I think Hopper has a really great model, but I don't think that the kind of traditional travel space will completely be eliminated in 2 years' time.
Okay, thanks, Errol. So we've had some last-minute questions come in here, but rest assured we have taken a note of all of them. Those of them are very specific. Our panelists will get back to you as soon as they can. We'll get those questions sent to them in the next few hours or so. So it just goes for me to say then thank you very much to Patrick in Boston, and obviously to Errol and Sean in South Lake in Texas today. Thank you very much to everybody for listening, and obviously thank you very much to Sabre Travel Network for supporting this one. As I said earlier, we have recorded the entire show, and that recording as a video on YouTube and all the slides will be put up on a post on Tnooz.com. We usually aim for within the next 10 hours or so, just as and when we can get to it. So once again, thanks very much for listening in, and we will see or speak to you all soon. Thank you very much.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.
No, it is, but
So it's consumer content and media content.
where's that coming from?
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.